Hey guys, this morning I made this post on Facebook where I said the following. Are you a Greta Thunberg hater? If so, you are garbage. And one of the reasons why I want to do this podcast is because I can't respond to so many of these important debates that happen on Facebook or on social media, where you're getting some heated debate with somebody with your thumbs on your cell phone. You can't really get deep into what it is I'm referring to here or why I'm saying what I'm saying. So, out of respect for people questioning me, I want to be more clear about it and respond to some of the comments I get about this and where I'm coming from. So, man, you've seen them come out of the just like banshees. These people can't stand Greta Thunberg. It's a hatred that's just like in a mockery and a ridicule and a belittling. It's embarrassing to watch. She's 22 now, but since she was 12 years old, they've been mocking her and taunting her and trying to discredit her in every way. Why? What's going on here? Why do they hate her so much? Okay, well now, she's gone from being protecting the environment and the planet to speaking up for the most oppressed on the planet, people in Gaza. And, we know what happens when you do that. So that's what we're seeing now. But even before that, so many, of course, Fox News and all these different media, quote unquote, figures. She's like a George Soros. She's up there on the Mount Rushmore of right wing hatred. Why do they hate her so much? I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's like you see people like Donald Trump, and they asked him, "What do you think about Greta Thunberg?" And he said, "I think she needs anger management." He's like, "Oh, I think she needs anger management. She's very angry. I can't do a Trump impersonation, by the way, which is probably a good thing. She's very angry. She needs anger management," he said, as he's sending Marines into Los Angeles and calling Gavin Newsom, and threatening Karen Bass and everyone that stands in his way. And she's the one that needs anger management. So, I mean, it's almost exhausting to continue to point it out, but more so than ever, this whole thing about every accusation being a confession. I mean, these fascists, they just don't know any other way but to project and to accuse their enemy that of which they are guilty. So when it comes to Piers Morgan, who, this guy is such a weasel. Recently he started to come around and call a spade, and he's not calling it a genocide, but he's saying, Israel has gone too far. So what's too far, really, in a genocide? There's this whole layer of people coming out now, Ehud Olmert, Ehud Barak, Yair Golan, different, some certain Democrats, the European Union. Genocide is okay up to a certain point. I guess it's when they start to see extermination, which is what's happening now in Gaza, which is the final solution, is what you can call it. And, a lot of Zionists are not going to like that, but that's what it is here. You're herding people into cages. You're starving them to death. You're taking 2 million people and you're locking them into a small region at the south. You've destroyed the entire region. I mean, what else can you bomb? What are you doing? The whole world sees you for what you are, which is deranged psychopaths. And you cannot be trusted. I'm talking about the state of Israel. You're in a complete fantasy land, which is causing genocide and mass starvation and mass destruction of the planet and people on the planet that are only on their land. They are the indigenous people of Palestine, you know. They didn't come from Poland. And in many cases, their land, their parents, their grandparents' homes is right on the other side of the fence, with people swimming in the kibbutzim, playing tennis, sunbathing on the land that was stolen in the Nakba, 1948, when 780,000 Palestinians were driven from their land, not by mistake, not by choice, not at the urging of Arab leaders, but through the ethnic cleansing of the terrorist, Zionist militias, like the Irgun and Haganah, and the Stern Gang. So they want to attack Greta Thunberg. Why? Well, you know, I think there's this connection here. Like, to go along with this genocide, to go along with the story of Israel's fantasy, you know, we're dealing with an historical epic that is the bourgeois revolution. And we're at the tail end of it. And I think we'll call it the entrails, maybe, of the bourgeois revolution here. And the bourgeois revolution, it's not a complete revolution, and it never was a complete revolution. So the whole thing is a fallacy at a certain point. Now, was it a necessary revolution? Yes, it was, for the merchant capitalist class, the burgeoning class that was coming up under feudal kingdoms and, feudalism. It was necessary to overthrow that system historically, which is what happened. But all throughout, there was another class underneath, below the bourgeois class, the serfs, peasants, slaves, wage slaves, eventually the proletariat. So this idea of freedom and liberty and all men are created equal. I mean, even some of the universal statements of freedom are just steeped in misogyny or, you know, male dominance, racism. So despite the actual stark reality of pushing all these, I don't want to say pushing, but promoting these new ideas of secularism and, you know, equality and freedom and liberty and fraternity, it was all based on hypocrisy anyway. It was all based on genocide of native peoples and slavery of Africans primarily. You know, completely wiping out the Taino population here in this hemisphere and many other entire tribes and entire peoples. So the reality of it is there's never been equality, fraternity. And when you had this Constitution written, it was not written for everybody. It was written, you know, and the right to vote and participate in this system was a privilege for white male property owners. So if you were a woman, or you were a poor white person, or you were a slave, then the system was never for you in the first place. And what did it take? It took a century or more of struggle. It took a civil war. And even after the Civil War, it took another 100 years before everybody had the right, legally, theoretically, to vote. So as many people, you may have heard other people say this, but if you want to talk about democracy and America's oldest democracy and blah, 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 the reality of it is there wasn't really a participatory democracy before 1965. So, you know, everything you're taught, everything we learn from the winners of history, the bourgeoisie, it's coming from their perspective in order to maintain their dominance, their class dominance, and maintain their empire at this point in the United States. So you have to believe this fantasy, really, you know, and you have to buy into it. And Israel is sort of that last bastion, you know, the last colonial settler state following in the footsteps of the Big Brother United States and Australia and Canada and South Africa. Rhodesia is no longer, but Rhodesia and Cecil Rhodes, the founder of Rhodesia, I mean, Theodore Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, modern Jewish Zionism, he was a big admirer of Cecil Rhodes, and he wrote him and corresponded with him, and he saw that not as something as to avoid, but something to model after Rhodesia. And if you're unfamiliar with the system down there, well, just look at South African apartheid. It's basically the same thing. Who was backing South African apartheid all those years? The United States, Israel, arming them, the most despicable regime on the planet, really, at a certain point, where the whole world had turned against them. But who was standing with them strong? Ronald Reagan, United States, till the very end, and Israel. Who was backing these death squads in Guatemala in the 1980s in throughout Central America and Honduras and Nicaragua, El Salvador? The United States. Where were the weapons coming from? Israel, primarily. So why are these countries constantly on the wrong side of quote-unquote history, or quote-unquote wrong side of history? It's phrase gets overused right now, but it is what it is, Sometimes it's apt, sometimes it's not. But when you look back, you see these racist, colonial, genocidal, white supremacist states carrying out these crimes. Now, Greta Thunberg had the nerve as a child to point out this type of cognitive dissonance that happens on a mass scale with the generations that preceded her. So we're saying that all of the science, everything points to the fact that we're destroying the planet. And we're not only destroying the planet, but we're in kind destroying ourselves. So it's like a mass suicide going on. And if we don't stop this behavior or that behavior, which has been proven by science, it's going to accelerate, and we're going to be on a planet that is uninhabitable by humans and other forms of life. So as a child, Greta Thunberg is coming out and saying, look, you're telling us, you're showing us the facts, you're telling it, and yet you're operating these systems and these militaries and these countries and these empires that are just churning out the poison. In fact, they thrive on it. It's the food they live on. Fossil fuels. And it's being pumped everywhere. So on the one hand, you're telling us this is going to kill us, this is going to kill us. And on the other hand, you're killing us. So a 12-year-old comes up and says, stop. You people are crazy. What about us? So what does she represent? She represents a truth of a child. Now she's an adult, but she's continued to carry that fundamental truth in the way that a child can see that if somebody comes up and just smacks someone in the face for no reason, it's unjust. They don't laugh and cheer it on. So why do these people hate her so much? Really, they hate themselves. They hate children. They may love their children, but in the end, why would you hate someone who's trying to save the planet? You think she's lying about everything. You think she's paid by George Soros. You think she's this, she's that. She wants publicity. All of that is just projection from these people's rotten souls, that they just can't look at a kid, and now a young adult, and just say, you know what? You're right. We fucked up, or we are horrible, or we didn't fight, we didn't do what it takes to change this situation for your generation, and now you're left with it. And not only are you left with it, but we're telling you it doesn't exist at the same time. And then if you go up against it, you're a fool, or you're just doing it for yourself, trying to get famous, trying to get likes. These people, these Zionists in Israel, and the Christian Zionists that backed them, and the imperialists that backed them, that wanted to mock this flotilla. Oh, Greta, Pierce Morgan, she's just doing it for herself and blah, 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 and stuff. What? To get on a little boat in the middle of the fucking ocean and sail to what you know could quite possibly be your death? What's the history? This is not a joking matter. First of all, Israel is starving systematically 2.1 million people. The people that are left of that population, it's less than that now. Systematically starving them to death. It's like a country, an entire country of Joseph Mengeles experimenting on Gazans because they don't think they're human. Well, they need to be stopped. But at any rate, oh, Greta, the selfie yacht. Oh, ha, 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 ha. They just want to take selfie. Well, you know what? Look at your IOF soldiers. And the reason why we call them IOF is because they're not defending anything. All they do is occupy and offend. So they are occupation forces. Legally, literally, in every sort of way. So the IOF has spent this whole time taking selfies. This is the selfie genocide. The selfie genocide. Oh, ha, ha. Trying on lingerie and women's underwear and bras in their bedrooms in the West Bank and in Gaza and in Lebanon. Just trampling through the whole region. It's a big frat joke. It's a big frat party for these motherfuckers, man. Taking selfies, joking. They're so clever, aren't they so funny? The selfie yacht. Oh, haha, they give them sandwiches and belittle them and diminish them. But I don't know if you saw the size of the crowd in Bangladesh yesterday in support of the people of Gaza. You know, Israel is deranged, deluded, demented, genocidal, psychopathic, rogue, terrorist state. And they need to be stopped from the outside. That's us, the people, the masses of people. Because the governments aren't doing it. You know? But Greta Thunberg was brave enough to stand up and do it. And take all the heat. And she doesn't even really need me defending her. She does it fine on her own. But, you know, I can't stand these motherfuckers. I'm sorry. So, I get a response. And I want to treat it with respect, you know. This person who I don't really know, but I have a friend on Facebook. And he challenged me on this post where I said, are you a Greta Thunberg hater? If so, you're garbage. And I'm thinking about these people, Russell Brand, Pierce Morgan, Donald Trump, you know, all of these pundits. And, you know, there's times where, look, I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a pacifist. And I am an agitator at times. And when I deem it necessary, I might pull a little figurative punch. So, you know, I just kind of want to draw the line here. Really, what are we talking about? These people hate this young woman who's simply trying to fight for a future and fight against genocide and oppression of everybody. But, you know, clearly the most oppressed on the planet. And she's standing up against it. She's the epitome of courage and bravery. And these people attacking her, I think, are garbage. Now, I don't throw the word out lightly. You know, my heritage is Eastern European Jewish, and, you know, my family was wiped out in the Holocaust as well. So I don't like treating, you know, generally take it lightly to call human beings garbage. But, you know, I just look at these motherfuckers. And sometimes I'm tired, and that's just it, you know. Like, if you can't muster up enough humanity to not attack, turn her into this evil villain, then what good are you really at this time when we see what's happening in the world? You're really on the side of the enemy, or you are the enemy. So this person wrote me, and he said, I'm I'm not saying I support people that hate Greta or the idea that Greta is anything but good in this world, because I don't. I believe the world needs more Greta Thunbergs. But isn't calling people you don't know garbage because their opinion differs from yours the last thing we need? I am no way trying to attack you, Ted, but even reading your post feels wrong and against the values that the majority of decent human beings like yourself try to live by. Why fuel the fire with that kind of rhetoric, which mimics the same rhetoric that I believe you and a lot of us are trying to get away from? I really don't know you, Ted, and all I'm doing is speaking my mind. Hope that doesn't get me in anyone's bad graces for just being open-minded to not using the same rhetoric that makes all of us garbage in the end. Instead of hate on a Facebook post, let's educate? ? I don't know, just speaking openly here with the utmost respect. So again, that's something that I can't really, well, first of all, I woke up to it in the morning, check my messages, and I haven't had coffee or anything. So it's pretty heavy stuff to wrap your head around, but I completely get the point. They're calling the people rising up in Los Angeles in rebellion against this fascist clampdown garbage, or the immigrants that come over here are garbage. But, I just feel like sometimes it needs to be put back in their face, and we're in a war really right now. Okay. There's a quote oftentimes attributed to Mao, but sometimes other places, but it's that politics is war without bloodshed, and war is politics with bloodshed. And once again, with this regime in power, we're in an in-between phase right now, and it's advancing fast into this new qualitative change, leap, and clampdown. When they have Marines backing up the National Guard, backing up the police, the sheriffs backing up the police, I mean, this is it. This is the clampdown. We're not waiting for the constitutional crisis. It's been going on. We've been trying to call it out for years and years, and it's accelerated, and they're in power now, and they're emboldened, and they've worked through one term, and now they have the second term, and they were persecuted with quote unquote, with kid gloves, persecuted by the Democrats while they were out of power for a brief time. And it was like throwing darts at Godzilla, and was only going to backfire, and it has. And now they've come back in power, and they're taking vengeance. And people like Stephen Miller and Sebastian Gorka, Steve Bannon, Laura Loomer, the way they see the world, the future that they want for the world, is being rammed down our throats. So I'm not here to unite with them. I'm not here to make less division. I think we need more division. I think we need more conscious division. I think we need people understanding what class they're in, or what class they fight for or fight with. Are you in the propertied class that's trying to maintain the system, that's trying to perpetuate the system, that's trying to continue to ram it down the world's throats as a model? Or are you trying to get rid of it? Are we trying to come together under this great country and this great flag? Or are we trying to overthrow this system, which has never been great? And as I said before, was founded on slavery and genocide, literally. You got to think about, when you're baking a cake, what are the ingredients you start with, and what's going to come out in the end? And if you start with dirt and, horse shit instead of flour and sugar, you're going to have to do a lot of work by the time you put the icing on that cake to make it palatable, to make it taste like something. And that hasn't been done here. They fought a civil war, and then Reconstruction, and the Democrats, as they do every time, well, in that case the Republicans, but the party at whatever moment in the U.S. that is supposed to be on the side of the people and the masses of people, they're not. And then they back off, and they acquiesce, and they give concessions to the Klansmen, the racists, the fascists, the white supremacists. So I'm not really trying to make nice, to be honest. I think that I watched Piers Morgan yesterday attack Greta Thunberg relentlessly, and I would say to your face, you're garbage, man. What are you doing? Donald Trump, Russell Brand, and maybe I'm projecting, maybe I'm doing the same thing. But I think there's a battle going on here, and there is an oppressor and there are the oppressed. And even if the oppressor or the forces carrying out genocide believe in their heads, they really believe that they're the victims and that the genocide is being carried out against them, well, they can really believe it, but it's not the truth. So I don't have to go along with it. It's like this thing with Terry Moran being fired at ABC, the newscaster, or, journalist at ABC, who said that Trump was a world-class hater and Stephen Miller was just basically filled with hate. And this is true. I mean, we could go on for hours. I could show you footage and quotes. But because they're one side of the equation, then you have to treat them equally, right? Both sides. Well, you see where we are with both sidesism. We have one side jamming their boot on our neck, which has been the plan all along. So this goes out to, the person that wrote me and questioned me, because it was in good faith and it was not disrespectful in any sort of way. And, this comment I made got a lot of support. I'm not any sort of big influencer. But it was a more popular post and by people who have a lot of empathy, and I think what it is that sometimes we just want to fight, and for me, it's like, I don't want to literally fight, but, the problem is that with this fascists especially, is that they don't ever give up. They might relent. They do have some sense of strategy at times, and there's just plenty of examples, of Mussolini or Hitler or any of the prototypical fascists coming off the gas pedal a little bit when it was necessary before they step back on the gas. But in the end, there's no question of what they're trying to accomplish, and they don't stop. They're not going to stop. So what do? We either give up, or we keep fighting. And I think Greta Thunberg is a role model for kids and for adults and for everybody. And, in the end, these people are delusional. You don't live in a democracy. Israel is not a democratic country. It's an apartheid state. And, sure. Like, the U.S. was the only democratic country in the U.S. during the Civil War. I mean, if you don't include all your slaves, or you don't include all the people of the land that you're legally occupying, then yeah, sure. If the democracy is only for Jews, in your head, yeah, okay, that's a democracy, but it's not. So let's deal with. We're in a world that's post-truth, and fascism relies on that. It relies on 2 + 2 is 5. It's the Gulf of America. And, Greta Thunberg's a terrorist supporter. War is peace. We know all these lessons, Now we have to learn them. Not learn them, but apply them. And there's too much cowardice. There's too much people not speaking out, not risking their necks, not willing to get on a vessel that could be attacked and you could die, because in 2010, Israel killed 10 people on the flotilla. So this wasn't a joke. And it's still not a joke. And people are starving to death and being shot at and bombed and blown to bits. And it needs to stop. So I say, good for you, Greta.